everyone has fundamentally, still today, disagreed that stablecoin infrastructure will be a thing for foreign countries. And we think that is obviously wrong. A majority of people believe that the US dollar will be like the SWIFT rails, where you have these US driven rails, and on these endpoints, there's an off-ramp to the blockchain. Stable bonds, essentially, which are these yield-bearing products, create what we feel are comparable currencies to the dollar that will complement bridging these countries to the blockchain in a way that's meaningful for them, in a way that drives efficiencies.
Season 7 of Stableminded is powered by Brale. With Brale, you can launch stablecoins in just minutes, and most importantly, actually make them usable. They have a single API that unifies licensing, custody, on-ramps, and off-ramps. Brale is the stablecoin issuer for emerging ecosystems like Canton and Lightspark, and they also provide core infra for payments and embedded finance teams like CoinFlow, Rain, Flashnet, and hundreds of others. This season is all about stablecoins for everyone. Learn more at brale.xyz. All right, Dave Taylor, thank you so much for joining. How's it going?
Good, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm excited for this. Etherfuse is building some really, specific and interesting technology on top of stablecoins and the rails that we'll get into. You've been building in the space for many years. I was re-listening to the conversation you had with Danielle Dixon from Stellar recently on some of these convictions you've held for many years are now starting to come true.
Yeah.
And why don't you, as we anchor the chat a little bit here, bring us into the stablecoin origins, or the origins of Etherfuse, even maybe before you started the business, like when this problem around what we now call stable bonds really started to become interesting for you to go work on. And then we can dive into how the platform works today, the product itself, how it's architected, maybe some of the use cases, but we can start with the origin story, if that works.
Great. Yeah, I'll give you 2 minutes on myself and co-founder, and then go into the company Thesis, and that kind of informs the product. It's all related. It's pretty interesting. My background's computer science, cryptography. I did like PKI infrastructure and security infrastructure as a software engineer for quite some time. So I did PKI infrastructure at Boeing, so loading software parts on a plane and running them and making sure it's the right thing. And at Apple, we did a similar thing. We did network security and infrastructure and PKI infrastructure. Then I went back to school and I met a friend of mine, and we started a startup studio, and we built a few startups together. And one of them that we were building together was called Neural Payments. And they're a great company. I think that they are continuing to grow, but the thesis is essentially the stablecoin thesis, but fix payments to work like stablecoins, where it's easy to transfer from P2P, person to person. And like the real customer there was credit unions who didn't like Zelle, because Zelle's owned by the bigger banks, and so they wanted their own alternative to that. So, but when we were building it, I brought on my current co-founder, AJ, who's my brother too. And we built that together, and just realizing how hard it would be in the US to actually fix how payments works and settlement works is nearly impossible, And in some sense, if there was just like this opportunity for a new technology to supersede it all, it would be better. Similar to like, in emerging markets where they're not going to lay fiber, they're just going to go straight to satellite for network infrastructure, because it would be too hard to like say all of Africa to lay down like underground fiber for internet services. In some cases it's so remote, it's like satellites are gonna be the way that they get the comparable technology to us. We felt like, hey, when we were building this, once we saw the blockchain get quicker, like what was really a flag for us was it was quicker and cheaper. It just felt like, oh man, this is an opportunity to like connect the world quickly that won't exist. So AJ and I, my co-founder at the time was Isaac Saldana, great person, past co-founder of a company called SendGrid. He supported it, and he wrote his first check, our first check. And we basically said, we want to provide the infrastructure to make payments across the world in a seamless way. And we kind of understood how it needed to be done. We had this thesis that if you could, what we call lift the interface of the risk-free rate in each currency, that you could fundamentally reduce payments and enable other people to create infrastructure on top of it that would do that. And that was 4 years ago. the US 4 years ago was super anti-crypto. And so we did not feel like the US would be a place for us to do this. We just spin our wheels on legal and other things. And in hindsight, it was the right choice, but I wonder if had we stayed in the US, we would have built a stablecoin issuance company like the ones that are blown up. I don't know, if we would have just pivoted. But in some ways we didn't because we found a fertile ground. So we did some research and we just hypothesized that the biggest economy with the most incentives to enable like blockchain-based payments for their population would be the right place for us to go. And they would be open to us to issuing assets on chain. So what we fundamentally wanted to issue was sovereign debt on chain. So yield-bearing assets on chain. And we have terminology for this today, but back then we didn't, right? Like now you say yield-bearing stablecoin, everyone knows what that is. Or you say reward-bearing stablecoin, everyone knows what that is. He had to like from first principles, like explain this idea and how it would work. And it's fundamentally a bond, right? A promise of payment based on some revenue source that a token holder would buy and then own. And so we looked around the world and we said, based on these criteria, which is like remittance payments, cost of credit, access to financial products, which country has the most incentives to say yes to us? And which we got a list. It was like Mexico, and then like a fourth would have been like Brazil and then Nigeria. So out of the China and India and Mexico, it was somewhat of a quick decision. China, it was pretty authoritarian. I don't think they'd let two Americans come in and build, I would say, like a sovereign product for payments there. And India is also historically pretty defensive. So if you're, as a foreigner, create a company there and it does well, they will fund a competitor quite heavily and outcompete you. This happened with like Uber and stuff like that. So we felt Mexico was really, out of those top three, the only real solution. And this is like still a crazy idea. Like no one still understands why we did this. And in some ways, it's still kind of like a radical idea, I guess is what I want to say. But we went to Mexico and we engaged their SEC, it's called the CNBV. And we said, hey, we want to create bonds on chain. And how do we do that? And in Mexico, there's this law. It's called the fintech law. And it's basically like a similar sandbox model. If you're in crypto or if you're in securities, you kind of know. It's like a sandbox model where you say, I have this new idea. It doesn't exist yet. I want to do it. Can we do it together? Go to jail and you can say, try this. But it's like in these guardrails, you get to build something innovative. And one thing that worked out that we totally had no idea was they came back 2 years later after back and forth, which 2 years later is a death sentence in a startup, by the way. And we survived somehow. They said, we don't believe that your asset's a security. And that was weird because it's basically like a no action letter. It's a omission. You may operate, We're not defining what this is. And so, but it doesn't fall here. And that was unique. It was cool in some cases. It gives us a huge leg up in the sense that we don't have this like long regulatory process anymore when we want to issue new assets. But we do have a lot of like nuance on how we do things. So in many ways, we've had to hypothecate what we are and then follow the laws that fit those best and ask for interpretations of the law. So since then, we've issued sovereign debt on chain in the form of a yield-bearing asset. So Etherfuse has by far the most foreign currencies on chain that at all for any company, but also that offer yield to the token holders. And our assets, they're reward-bearing. So as you hold it, they're continually compounding. They accrue yield and value almost in real time. And so that's what Etherfuse is. That's the history of us. But what Etherfuse fundamentally is sovereign debt on chain in the form of a reward-bearing token. We've issued today about 7 different countries. By the end of 2026, we'll have over 100. We're launching Korea and most of Asia in Q1. And it's really exciting to see because now that we're here, there's a lot we can do that can help people kind of see the future of this stablecoin space. So I want to stop there because there's more to like our philosophy, but that's like the foundational layer of what Etherfuse is. And I think the why is still yet to be discussed, but that's how we got here.
It's really, really beautiful. It seems like this year is going to be an extremely high growth year in terms of just countries, like going from 7 to over 100. I'm excited to dive into that a little bit. I guess the part that I'd love to know more about, and just to give context to maybe some of the people who are just now tuning in to the state of the builder economy, the founder economy, like what it's like to be building in this space right now versus 4 years ago when you started. Um, and you can't go back and you can't go back and do things over. But it seems like you've had sort of like a strategic thought of like where you built, how you built. Personally, when I think about Etherfuse and the position that it sits in this market, there are a lot of those like US focused issuance companies like Brale and like these other folks who are kind of running down that lane with US dollar focused stablecoins. But I think Etherfuse has such a unique position in the market, and at least from my early understanding of it, I appreciate that a lot. So I'm just maybe speak a little bit more to like what that decision to go into this like Mexico first option, not US first, or the infrastructure you were building now with sovereign debt in more of these emerging markets, what that's now created, and how you even objectively think about the opportunity now versus 4 years ago.
I think a lot of it is like first principles of a startup was who are we? What can we do that other people can't? And what are people doing that we should be doing that they're not? And if you had a Venn diagram, that's like totally Etherfuse. So we viewed, and we've come to be right here, but I don't know that we were right on not playing in this space. But we essentially said, as like 4 years ago, like as regulatory, to me, like this space is inevitable. So maybe I'll put you in my mindset. Like 4 years ago, people were thinking this was like just a joke and it's all fraud. And still today, you see politicians saying that, but it is
this meaning traditional financial instruments,
crypto,
the economy that is traditionally represented now on chain. That for you has been just like, this is going to happen. It's just a matter of when.
It's so obvious. Like, and I think it was obvious to us because we were building in TradFi these things like the stablecoin thesis, And so it is inevitable. It doesn't matter right now what anybody does. Like if a different party switches over, we're too far in and it's too much better than the traditional way of doing things that, I mean, that's a very bad way to say what I'm saying, but that it's inevitable. And so in that mind frame, we were thinking, okay, well, how can we be lucky enough to succeed in this space? So we viewed like as regulatory moats are removed through clarity, like with the Genius Act, there are a lot of people given that clarity who will be able to just throw money at a problem like banks and win this space. So we felt in the US, we don't have anything, there's nothing about us that will help us outcompete like JPMorgan. Or outcompete like the Tether or USDC or these other people. So, and there were also a lot of very smart people like Brale and like CoinFlow that we know and we're friendly with that were working in this space. So we said, everyone has fundamentally still today disagreed that stablecoin infrastructure will be a thing for foreign countries and in foreign currencies. And still today, people say that. And we think that is obviously wrong. That if we're going to connect the global world and if it's such a leap of like technological achievement and embetterment and efficiency gains, that obviously this space will participate. And no one was doing it. Yeah, but also the way people, I guess I would say no big players were doing it. And also the way that the people who were entering in the space were doing it, they were doing it in a way that we felt it was wrong. And let me explain. I think fundamentally people that a majority of people believe that the US dollar will be like the SWIFT rails operate today, where you have these US driven rails. And on these endpoints, there's kind of like an off ramp to the blockchain. There are some assumptions there that we think are wrong in that those countries will start to spend and operate and use the dollar instead of their own currencies. And so we said, well, how can we, given that we believe that that's not true, what do we need to build? And stable bonds, essentially, which are these yield-bearing products, are our thesis or our counter argument, where we create what we feel are comparable currencies to the dollar that will complement bridging these countries to the blockchain in a way that's meaningful for them, in a way that drives efficiencies. So that's the why of Etherfuse is no one really has conviction in this space necessary to on-ramp the rest of the world. And there's a lot of value we can bring in this space. And no one is really set up to do it well because of the way that they've chosen to go at it from a US-centric model. And it's pretty interesting how it's played out, because now you have a lot of players in the stablecoin space. They're all great people, all competing over this large market share. And then you have the other 50% of this market that's a ghost town, except for Etherfuse. And it's just interesting that people have let us get to this space, this place.
You're talking about US focused assets versus non-US focused assets.
Yeah, if you look at like the market and like the balances that the world holds, it's about half non-US and it's half US. And so if you look at the TAM, it's everyone competing out for half the market, or 80% of the FX market, I guess you could say. But no one's really focused on the rest. And so Etherfuse is focused on the rest. We love where we're from. We love the United States. It's a great place. We believe in it. But we also believe that there's these other opportunities and this value that we can bring. And so a lot of people in this space are truly our partners. We're non-competitive with them in any way. One of our earliest partners, Brale, which is a US stablecoin issuer, we work together to issue stablecoins regulated from the US that are denominated in other currencies. And one of our most successful one is the Mexican peso. So that's something that cannot happen, one, without Etherfuse, and cannot happen without the blockchain. You cannot have like a US company issue a foreign currency in any meaningful way and TradFi. But it happens today with Brale, and it is the cheapest way to send money to Mexico today. It's the cheapest FX rates by far, and almost nobody really knows it yet.
Let's double click on this a little bit on like just one, how that works, how you've structured that with Brale, and maybe how that's similar or different to other sovereign coins or stable bonds that you're going to bring to the market with Brale or in other forms. I'm just curious, like what does it take to practically do that? As Brale is they have MTLs, they're, I think, a money service business in the US. It sounds Etherfuse is a US based firm, correct, in this context?
We are not, actually.
Okay.
Well, a little bit of complicated there. So our cap table is in the US. So from an investment structure, it is. We do have operational units where we're regulated from, and our operations are held. So we started in Mexico. So we have two companies in Mexico that issue and custody customers' assets. We also now have one in Kazakhstan as well, because this is probably another story, but in Mexico, we got a no action letter, which is like this implicit okay. In Kazakhstan, we got an explicit okay, which is like, we understand what you do and this is how you do it. So it gave us a little more confidence in what we do. So anyway, I would say the best way to describe us is we are a foreign company with an investment vehicle in the US.
Okay. And then with that approach, it sounds like you sort of take a localized approach to each market that you want to go into. But yeah, how does Brale fit into this? And specifically maybe with this Mexican use case, what does that look like?
So I'll go back to our product and then I'll go back to Brale. Our product is, we set up regional infrastructure to buy, custody, and issue bonds on chain that are essentially synthetic pointers to real bonds, and give anyone in the world or anyone on the blockchain access to them. So we go into Mexico as one example. We create rails to mint and burn our assets from any bank account by any person. So we give you like virtual access to infrastructure there through sovereign debt, where you can hold and buy those bonds with crypto. So Brale wants to issue a Mexican peso from the US. And maybe I'll step back further. A stablecoin is somebody gives you $1, you're a stablecoin issuer. You keep that dollar, you put about 75% in bonds and 25% in cash, fiat, and then you issue them a token, right? So we cover the part of the bond purchase, the collateral. So Brale with stablecoins can now custody Mexican bonds to create a safe collateral to issue a Mexican product. And so the way that we operate is we enable the world to have the mechanics to issue foreign currencies. And Brale has the regulatory ability to issue money on chain, or maybe some lawyer wants to change me saying money, but issue a pegged currency or pegged coin on chain. And they wouldn't be able to do that legally in any way without using us in the blockchain. You could probably, not in any efficient way for sure. And so what we do is we just create this infrastructure. We go to Korea, we go all over the world. We get these huge institutions that are regulated in those countries, the trusted institutions like BBVA or Shinhan Bank, and we collateralize and we hold those assets in a bankruptcy remote way for token holders. And so token holders can buy those assets and build things on top of them. And so we give you virtual rails into those economies so that you from your area can run a company and create products.
It's really cool. What's been the most difficult part of this? I mean, I'm imagining just you going from 7 to over 100 in the next 12 months, given this setup that you've described where you're taking a very local approach, you're working with these players. How is that practically going to work? Are you having like one-to-many relationships that are really meaningful? Maybe bring us into the like go-to-market of the next 12 months and how you get there.
Well, the original hard part is no one would bank us. So there was like, what's that banking controversy where they're debanking everybody? I can't remember. But
Choke point?
Choke point, yeah. So choke point had foreign implications because the U.S. has what I would say all the leverage, or had all the leverage. It's changing with crypto, but where they could say, if you want to be a banking partner with us, you can't do X, Y, Z. So we would go to banks in Mexico or banks in Spain or and they would say, hey, we just did a quality check and JPMorgan Chase said that we can't work with you, which was just crazy. So in the past, we would get multiple custodians per asset because every now and then one would drop us, right? That's all gone. That problem is gone. And so what that has let us do is consolidate with strong partners. So before we'd have to go specifically into each country, find what I would say is a mid-tier regulated entity who would work with us. And now we can level up a little bit where we can, like the 2026, we're focused on consolidating our custodians, the minimal set that gives us the most breadth. And so that's why I'm confident in the addition of these currencies. The system, the CRM, the infrastructure to manage the purchase of these assets and to ensure that the rate is being compounded at the same rate as the assets in the back. That's all built. Adding new kind of what I'd say partners and custodians is pretty trivial. And so we're actually going to shrink the size of our current custodian base, but they will be, I'd say, bigger partners and you'll hear them. I mean, some are obvious. You can go to our site. BBVA and Shinhan are two of the biggest ones there, like the BlackRock of Latin America and the BlackRock of Asia. So that's helping us get breadth to the rest of the world. And that gives us rails, that gives us access to those economies without doing a ton of work each new location.
Yeah. So 12 months from now, you're going to do this. We're going to talk again. You're going to have over 100 of these currencies issued. You're going to have a really condensed list of custodians. I think next year is going to be a massive year of growth for your business, but also just the utility of these things and bringing the market into more of a mean of what really the true financial markets are today with companies like you guys. And I'm really excited for that. I think you've spoken on the idea of how competition at the currency level is really good. And it's good for the US to have that level of competition. If you look at the still over 99%, I think, of the total supply being US stablecoins. I think that there's such an upside for you guys to ride on that. Zoom us into the moment where this really, like maybe to make this, we're still laying the groundwork as you're offering more of these products, but I'd love to better understand in your mind, based on the conversations you're having with the, I guess what you might think of as like the demand side or the adoption side of now that these products exist, how they're going to market, who the first really key exciting movers are. Bring us into what is now possible cross-border and some of the things that you're seeing maybe historically versus what now is possible when all of these 100 plus currencies with Etherfuse are available.
Let me go back and answer the question. First, let me tell you what's possible and what's exciting coming up, but let me go back and tell you what's one of the harder problems that we're facing. And then we can get back into, how these solutions are going to become more and more available in 2026. So the biggest thing is bringing FX truly on chain is happening. We're live today from the US to Mexico on different chains where you can truly FX on chain, but also bringing the risk-free rate of other currencies and virtual banking on chain is coming officially live. So fundamentally, Etherfuse from a user's perspective is just two and a half products. It's yield, safe yield, and then it's FX. And even though there's tons of stuff that happens, now part of that, the half is hedging. So if you want to send a big payment, from the US to like Brazil, and it's going to take officially like between two companies like 4 days to settle. It's not the technology, it's like literally the agreement between the two parties sometimes takes time. You want to hedge that payment so you're not exposed to some FX risk. We can do that for you. So those are the exciting things that are coming for every currency that we have. Now, the reason why 2026 is going to be a big year is because I think we've demonstrated our value. One of the harder things that has existed is in high growth and in VC, you can be outfunded and your ideas can be outfunded, I guess is what I'd say. And up until this point, VCs were just throwing money at anybody who I think took the US centric view, because it fits the power laws of VC investment. And we've outsurvived a lot of those companies, or they're getting acquired and getting bought up and doing different things. I think really I just released this paper called Stablecoins Are Not Enough. I don't know if you had a chance to read it, but it is fundamentally a thesis to on-ramp the rest of the world. We need more than just this like stablecoin interface. We need that plus the stable bond interface. So what we are doing fundamentally this year is partnering up with what I'd say is we call them local or regional stablecoin issuers and creating a complementary product to help them succeed on chain. So the easiest way to think about this is if you are like I'll just use Mexico because I know Mexico really well, but you could pick any other product, right? There are about $90 billion worth of flows from the US to Mexico every year, or growing to about that this year. And DeFi doesn't really have an optimal way to facilitate that marketplace on chain, because to facilitate that, you'd need about 4 to 5 billion in liquidity on chain in the peso to create the counterparty pair. Well, nobody wants to LP or provide liquidity for the peso because it's viewed as a high risk asset. So right now, people will LP like dollar product marketplaces because they say, oh, I have like 100K. I might as well tokenize that and put it in a marketplace. I can earn like 3% more, or something like that. And then I could in bonds because I get those fees. Well, the peso, you don't want to swap to the dollar to the peso to LP because it fluctuates wildly, right? So our stable bond product is what I would say a comparable store of value to the dollar, because it is 100% for the most part the sovereign debt of that country. Now, the way sovereign debt works, markets for the most part, they have to create a reward for people holding their currencies or investing in their debt. And that reward has to compensate them for not holding the dollar. So sovereign yield, for the most part, will give you greater returns than it would for you holding the dollar. So even though this marketplace of the future, say some AMM or some order book, won't really work with a stablecoin peso, it will work with a stable bond peso. And so we are this like counterparty product that can be exchanged on chain for a local stablecoin for free because it's denominated in the same currency, and can give you access to participate in these marketplaces that you otherwise couldn't participate in. So we feel we've built a product that helps on-ramp the rest of the world by enabling them to participate in DeFi, which will enable these flows to happen on chain. So that was a lot. That's like a word salad, So hopefully I explained it well, but we think this is like the missing element and people are starting to recognize it. So for us, we are partnering up and engaging a lot of local stablecoin issuers and creating the missing element for them to move flows through them off chain. So the way it would work is a USDC
These would be
pair.
like the Brale equivalents globally.
Yes, exactly. And really excited about it. I mean, we've fought really hard in the I would say the arena of ideas on Twitter and against like well-funded competitors. And I think we've been right. It's not like we've been necessarily better or better funded. We haven't. We've been less funded than most of them, but a good idea is a good idea. And I think this year it's undeniable, and we'll start to see this growth as a lot of these stablecoin issuers like look to participate on chain in more meaningful ways by working with us.
Yeah. So right now, you have this situation that exists where, to your point, different treasury jurisdictions or parts of the world, US Treasury versus Brazil or others will have different returns based on what their treasuries are returning. I think I heard recently that Brazil is around 15%. Is that right? Something like this. And US is like 5-ish, give or take, 5, 6,
It's probably closer to 4 today,
4.
but yeah, US and yes.
So you have, in my mind, I'm just simplifying this, you have this reality where like there are different returns coming from different places. And are you imagining from a programmatic standpoint for generating returns? That's the whole goal. You said it's, FX or yield. If yield is the goal, what are some of the builders or developers that you're talking to? How are they thinking about what is now possible from like a routing or like yield optimization standpoint that you now have when a market like Brazil that's returning more than 3 times or 4 times the percentage of, obviously the risk is different, the jurisdiction you're interfacing is different, but how are the developers or builders that are working with you thinking through optimizing returns when a highly optimized, highly effective programmatic layer of money can now exist in this way? Like, am I thinking about this right? Or what are the developers you're working with thinking through?
I think you are. And I think really the outcome is pretty simple. It's like if you look at the fintech world, it's like TransferWise, it's like, these neobanks. All they offer is yield and payments, and it's cheaper and better on chain. So I think we're going to start to see these neobanks provide what we call like embedded or Web 2 crypto powered products that enable to run their businesses today. So I just think that multi-currency accounts will come available, but they'll be powered by stablecoins. I think FX will now move on chain because it's way cheaper, like factor cheaper. I think you'll see as the world starts to wise up, the crypto space starts to get smarter. You'll see people recognize, like right now, I mean, no one will say this and the president would never say this out loud, but they are actively devaluing the dollar, and it's on purpose. It's to increase the middle class, right? To increase the purchasing power of the dollar, the ability to have manufacturing come back in the US, right? No one would say this, but it's happening. So how does an ecosystem that's 99% denominated in the dollar, save their value? You put it in Bitcoin or you could put it in Solana, but that's also highly volatile, right? Well, we give you the opportunity to diversify into safe assets. Like the peso has outperformed the dollar like by 20%. It's crazy. So if this last year you would have just held your assets in stable bonds, you're returning like 20% greater. So I think that we'll start to see more sophisticated TradFi actors recognize that these things exist and be able to use them to their benefit to do better hedging, to better diversification. But also, I think we'll start to see the fintech winners of the last decade use embedded crypto for their products because it's just a better infrastructure. So like the Neobanks and things like that.
Yeah. You guys are at such a foundational layer in some ways to make this work. You have the issuance, I'm trying to visualize this a little bit. You have the issuance layer, the Brale layer in a way above it that is building and delivering some of these specific programs to market. And then you have their end users or the neobanks or those who are like maybe integrating or embedding at the top. Is that I know it's oversimplified, but is that a kind of a way that you see this where you are really interfacing with those like kind of core issuance partners locally, and then they're delivering those financial products to the fintech neobank?
Yes, at the end of the day, and historically we've had to build stuff to prove that it works, like with Brale, we really had to like build it together. And in some ways it was like us convincing them to do it. And we've also built like FX pools and stuff like that to convince them to do it. But at the end of the day, we want to be like an AWS of sovereign debt. So sovereign debt gives you virtual access to that location. So we don't necessarily want people to know that it's Etherfuse powering it. We want to have these strong relationships with like the Revoluts, with like these marketplaces, with stablecoin issuers. That's where we see ourselves fitting in, mostly because no one's doing it. And it's a big, complicated job. And we are the like fundamental first business principle. It's something that we can do better than anyone else in the world. And we feel like we're the only ones who can really do it. We understand this space. And there's not really a benefit for other people doing it. Like our fees are like smaller than brokerage fees. It's just the value we can add. So yes, we view these new fintech products as being the ultimate like interface with customers, where they're just using us under the hood to provide these services.
As you think about the way that this takes shape, it sounds like from the front end user, one, they probably won't even know Etherfuse is being used here. But it seems like the way you're describing it, the really big, exciting, the next couple of years of this is when the Revoluts of the world begin to realize they can embed some of those things that they're delivering today on traditional rails or building themselves on traditional rails into a native embedded blockchain powered system built on top of Etherfuse. Like what is the dream customer, or the dream, if you could just kind of like wave a magic wand and have this company email you tomorrow and be like, hey, like we would love to talk about working together. What is that use case that you guys are ready to, maybe two-part question. Like what is the use case you can deliver today that you can just hit a home run and like, please send me the email because we're ready to deliver, versus like, let's go build this thing together over the next 12 to 24 months because this is the real big opportunity, like today versus 2 years from now. Who are those types of companies?
We have many of these launching in 2026, by the way. So, and maybe I won't say a specific one because of that reason, but we are not building anything together. We are ready today. So we have fintech companies integrating with us today to offer these services. And what are they offering? They're offering multi-currency accounts that return yield like savings accounts. So they're offering savings accounts in other currencies that can FX and be sent to to and from those local destinations for cheaper than they can today. So those are the big winners. So neobanks is what I would say. Neobanks are our favorite type of customer because we solve a lot of their problems right away. The others would be those who want to issue, maybe I shouldn't say this, but some cool credit card products we have coming up, where we can do some very cool things with local payments. And on the other side, this is like a two-sided market for us. The other big partners are these regulated institutions with big distribution channels. Those are great opportunities for us to enhance our services. You could pick any neobank, any wallet that has huge distribution channels. We're a great partner for them on day one. We can give them Web2-like APIs that let them send payments anywhere in the world, have yield anywhere in the world, and do whatever they want, issue stablecoins in those currencies. And those are the big opportunities and partners for us.
On this last point, I know your computer is maybe going to die here in a second, but
I'm sorry about that. I don't know why it's going slow though, so it's still at 3%. So we can.
It's okay. We'll throw one more in here. For me personally, like the credit card stuff, the layer in which that sits from a mass adoption standpoint and a real like learned behavior standpoint, in my mind, is something that is so fascinating and prime for disruption. Like my first job out of college was cold calling merchants at Square to try to convince them to change their point of sale, and just the severe pain that class of businesses all around the world face with their point of sale and payments, and still that like layer of issuing, acquiring, and credit card processing. Like, there's so much economic value that is leaking away from communities because of these things.
Yes.
You have, what you've created is essentially, you talked about this on the pod with Stellar, this intermediary, like the intermediary layer can essentially evaporate if you have something like stable bonds because of the native settlement that this unlocks. Maybe just speak a little bit to that with maybe some of these payments or cards, or how you think about that. I'm selfishly asking because I just get so fired up about native settlement.
Yeah. So if you know how a lot of cards work, a lot of it is like on the card, if you post collateral, they'll unlock payments in that region. I don't know if you've like the prepayment cards. So stable bonds are an efficient form of collateral that is comparable to that regional fiat. So you see all these like stablecoin card issuers that are blowing up, right? Well, in Latin America, those are still blowing up, but they're inefficient because every time you pay, you have FX. So you want to buy a soda with your credit card, you hit like 100 bips FX. Well, our products don't have FX in those regions. So we provide the exact same utility with no FX. And those merchants and those credit card partners can interface with us directly to manage that collateral that needs to be posted. So a customer could load up the card using our assets or even just any crypto, and we swap it to our asset, which is the safest form of collateral that can be used for that card. We've unlocked regional payments that are cheaper using the blockchain than anyone else. And we are launching in Q1 a pretty awesome demo of this that I'm very, very excited about. But it's going to blow up because it's just so much better. So if that makes sense to you,
yeah.
I'm being cryptic, but I'll show you.
No, I'm
Q1.
excited. Let's maybe that'll be our takeaway here in Q1. Let's by that time we'll hopefully have our live stream kind of like news show going, and that would be, we'll make sure we'll get our mics and everything ready before we get that show live. But it'll be fun to, one, Dave, just like, I'm excited for just to know more about that, because that sounds epic. And personally, I just once you get that nailed, the scalability of that recipe is going to be something that most markets around the world are going to need. It's just like, so excited to hear more on that. Any final thoughts on just like what you would leave a stablecoin focused listener with, ways to support you guys, get involved? I just personally highly recommend you follow Dave Taylor on X, Etherfuse, even throw Mike Featherstone a follow. Why not?
Yeah.
Hope he's enjoying his new role there. It was exciting to hear you guys brought him on. But yeah, man, any final thoughts to the listener base?
I think the biggest point we're trying to make is, if we truly want to on-ramp the world, an ecosystem or technology that is solely reliant on one currency isn't efficient or capable. And so I think we just want to wrap it up by saying, like, we have a reason to exist and a purpose to exist, and that's why we still exist, given that we've been, I'd say, punching up quite a bit. And so the way you can get involved is participate. If you're a stablecoin issuer, we want to work with you. We're not competitive with you in any way. If you are a neobank or you have payments products, we can improve those value that you keep. If you're a foundation, we can bring FX on chain. So we can enhance like pretty much the full ecosystem in crypto by partnering with you. And it takes kind of a collaboration, because we're not the distribution channel, we're just the assets. So, and we want to work with you. So one, it's just like, read our stuff. I think we're right. And it's been contrarian for 4 years. I think now it's becoming quite obvious. And so let's work together.
Awesome. Dave, thanks for the time. Excited to continue following the journey into the new year, and happy holidays to you and your family, and just appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Have a good one.
Thanks, Dave. See you, man.